What's up? Welcome in. Hoge and Jahns back with you, ending a very busy week for the Chicago Bears, adding
Stephen Carlson.
Stephen Carlson back to, I was about to say, like the big five that they've signed.
The Fab Five.
Like, it's a little disrespectful to Durham Smythe.
Why wasn't he introduced?
I don't know.
I imagine he came to Hall and signed the contract.
Maybe. Or he just did the DocuSign.
Could be.
I don't know.
Usually, you like getting that picture. You got to get that picture in the boardroom with.
But they didn't put that out. You would think if he did,
so maybe he did DocuSign.
Maybe I don't know. He's in Miami. Why would he?
An e-signature.
Yeah, I'm not coming to Chicago until at least April. Well, today it's gonna be really nice. But it has been back-to-back days of hearing from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson. Don't get that a lot, but it is that type of season. And by the way, shout out to the Bears too for I think making the head coach available both days too. I mean, this is really more like Ryan Poles' season, rebuilding the roster, but obviously Ben Johnson's presence and impact on all this is enormous. So to hear him comment on the offensive lineman, especially, I think it was pretty informative. And there's some interesting things he said the last couple of days.
What was your favorite description that he used during his press conferences to describe the players that he got?
Well, I mean, I think he had a moment kind of both days. The first day, and I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but when he was explaining the linemen, he was like tough, gritty, whatever that quote was.
Some dirty.
I mean, he said dirty, yeah. Dirty. Get some dirty. Like that's I like that. And then yesterday too, sort of shutting down a question about, how do you make this easier on your, on your team? And he's like, I'm making it easier. This is supposed to be hard. This is the NFL and it's football. And I liked both of those answers. I just think it kind of, these players don't know Ben Johnson yet. He hasn't addressed the team yet. He's just, individual conversations here and there. So I imagine they're watching these press conferences too, and trying to get a vibe of their new coach. And I think that kind of sets the tone.
I like how he explained the importance of intelligence, which kind of gets overlooked when you get quotes about some dirty, some gritty, some tough. Everyone loves hearing that because that's what you want out of your offensive lineman. You want tone setters. You want some mean men up front. But the intelligence part, that stood out to me where he's talking about Drew Dalman, how he already had a lot on his plate, but we're going to put more on that plate. We think he can do more. I like hearing that. Or you have Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney, guys who have experienced a lot, guys who can handle different schemes that allow us to do more. I like that because he wants to be diverse with his offense. He wants to do more than just run outside zone and whatnot. So to hear him explain the importance of intelligence, that to me is one of the most important takeaways from the 2 days we had at Alice Hall.
Yeah, I thought Drew Dalman, showed that. He was kind of a quieter, more reserved guy. I mean, certainly in contrast to Grady Jarrett the day before, but just him, asking him about his game, and he talked about that intelligence and preparation. He's a Stanford guy, and hopefully that pays off on the line of scrimmage, just kind of understanding what's happening up front, because that's a big piece of the puzzle. It's a big piece of the center position too.
You get a vibe of just how serious Drew Dalman is, Jonah Jackson is, and Joe Thuney are. Like that's if I had to describe the charisma of them, the emotion, at least the energy that they exuded in these situations, is there's a level of seriousness, professionalism that you appreciate. Maybe the Bears appreciate more than we do, obviously, in terms of what they're going to provide that offensive line.
Let me ask you this before we actually got a couple of guests on today's show.
James, man.
Yeah, James Boyd, who covers the Colts for The Athletic, is going to join us, and Nate Taylor, who covers the Chiefs for The Athletic, is going to join us to talk about some of these free agents. But one of the other guys, I wanted to ask you about this because, I think we both had some initial questions about Jonah Jackson coming over, switching positions, going to go to right guard. First of all, we we heard what Ben Johnson had to say about him in his press conference the other day. And we also find out from Mike Garafolo last night that the Bears tacked on an extra year onto his contract as part of this trade, adding some guarantees in 2026, which weren't there before. Does the things you heard, so both the words and the actions, when you talk about adding on, years onto a contract, give you a better sense of confidence in this signing on the offensive line?
Well, it's more meaningful when actions, in this case, a contract extension in a sense, more money in 2026. Like when the actions back up the words, that's telling. That's more meaningful in this case. I thought Jonah Jackson may have downplayed the impact of his shoulder injury last year when he was speaking to us.
I agree.
In the more informal setting after his press conference when we were off to the side there. It was a factor. I think the Bears would tell you it was a factor. So I think he's healthy now. I think he gets to enter training camp healthy in one spot without any transition period, and better yet, in an offense and with a head coach he's familiar with. So I think that's a benefit to him. But yes, to your point about money, 2026, I think that's meaningful going forward. It's a sign of faith. And I also think it fits this like 2-year window that's opening up here with these moves. Because if you look at the details here, the Bears are doing a lot of things within the rookie contract of Caleb Williams. So this 2-year window that's opening up here where they've invested, where they've spent some money, all the contracts kind of align with this. Joe Thuney does too. I'm expecting there haven't been immediate extension talks. That was my understanding not too long ago. We'll see how fast that changes, but you got this 2-year window kind of opening up for the Bears where they're spending some money and they're being serious about the development and what's next for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I think that's extremely notable because really none of these deals this week, put the Bears in any peril long term if they don't work out. And I thought the way that these things were structured was very notable. And I agree that Thuney extension will be something we'll have to continue to watch here in the coming weeks and months, maybe. Sometimes it takes longer. I think if you look at the Bears roster right now in terms of extensions, you're probably eyeing Joe Thuney and you're eyeing Kyler Gordon as sort of the priority for the Bears.
I would expect Kyler Gordon to surpass that 2-year window that we're talking about. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 2-year extension for Joe Thuney, but probably still it's still within that rookie contract of Caleb Williams, which is important just in terms of team building before that major quarterback contract eats up a lot of your salary cap.
Yeah. All right. Well, one of the two guys that was introduced on Thursday at House Hall was Dayo Odeyingbo coming over from the Indianapolis Colts. We need to get the download on him and why the Colts let him go, why he's a Bear now. And so to do that, we're going to bring in James Boyd, who covers the Colts for The Athletic.
Well, first things first, James, congrats on the new radio show in Indianapolis. So thanks for joining us immediately after your show.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, just be glad I love you guys because, 7 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday on 107.5 The Fan here in Indianapolis. Our number one sports station just started 2 weeks ago. So, getting up at 5:45 a.m. every day is a little different. I usually only get up there early for flights, but when you all reached out, I figured why not? Obviously, I know a lot about Dayo and keep up with the Bears myself just because I'm from the area. So happy to help.
You go to bed early now.
I was going to say, this is not nothing. Guy does a morning radio show all week. It is Friday. I mean, he is ready to get going with his weekend, and he's going to jump it on with us. So thank you so much, man.
Anytime. I mean, it is what it is. And as far as going to bed earlier, I don't know about that because my goal is like midnight every night at this point. Go to bed at midnight, get up at 6. I live pretty close to the station. I can get 6 hours. I'm pretty good to go.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. We just met Odeyingbo yesterday for the first time at Hallis Hall. And, one of the things he mentioned is how he played all across the line of scrimmage with the Colts. So maybe can you take us through everything he did in Indianapolis?
Yeah, so I would say this past season especially, I mean, he was already a pretty versatile player. I think he's big enough to play inside. He certainly can, play with some force. They nicknamed him Hurricane Dayo out here because he can cause some havoc. And then he can also have enough agility and speed to get around the edge occasionally too. But last year, it was kind of a weird season for him. I know he didn't have like the contract year he wanted, but a lot of that, people who don't know, they dealt with so many injuries on the defensive line. So we go back to 2023 when he had the 8 sacks, and that's what everyone kind of looks at. Is like, man, why did it fall off? Well, coming into 2024, the leading sack guy for the Colts, Samson Ebukam, tore his Achilles in training camp. So he's out. And then you have DeForest Buckner, one of the top defensive tackles in the league. And I believe in week 2, he had a high ankle sprain. He's out for 5 weeks. He goes on IR. Another defensive end, Tyquan Lewis, a good reserve guy. He messes up his elbow. He misses 7 games. And so Dayo, being as durable as he is, they're asking him to go to so many different places on the defensive line. So I feel like he wasn't able to thrive in one spot. He honestly had to kind of like patch up some holes for a lot of people and a lot of things for the team to kind of keep him afloat. Whereas I think when he's, kind of cemented into like that number 3 or number 2 role, he can thrive more like that. And so I do commend him for kind of, accepting the challenge. He never complained about his role, never complained about his numbers. I know he's kind of frustrated at times that he wasn't able to have the seasons that he wanted to have. However, I think the versatility part of it is why they kind of put so much on his plate, is because it's like, all right, if we got to, plug this leak, this is the best guy to do it. And then again, he would have those occasional moments where he looks very dominant. I don't think he's a dominant player overall, but he will have dominant moments for the Bears for sure.
So, the money question with all these free agents when they change teams is why is the team that they're leaving letting them go? From all I've heard from you here, and I talked to JJ Stankovitz early in the week too, like no one in Indy seems to have a problem with this guy. And everybody seems to agree he's sort of on the up and up because he was asked to do a lot and the defense overall wasn't that good. So the ball was getting out quick. That affects sack numbers too. So what's the situation here on why the Colts just, let him go?
I think it was more so he just priced himself out of their market. Like they did not want to let him go. And I want to make that very clear. Like he was definitely a coveted player here in Indianapolis, but it was just kind of a situational, how it is with most NFL teams. You got to figure out, okay, where do we kind of upgrade this offseason and where can we kind of, perhaps, reallocate some assets. And so in this case, you go back to last season, the Colts drafted Latu out of UCLA with the 15th pick. So they invested, obviously very big in the defensive end room. And then on top of that, they picked up Kwity Paye's 5th-year option for $13.4 million guaranteed in 2025. And then it felt like because of that, keep in mind, Samson Ebukam, he's going into a contract year. They signed him to a 3-year, I believe, $24 million deal. He's getting paid. DeForest Buckner's getting paid. Grover Stewart just got back, on extension. So it's like, how much money are you going to put in this defensive line, and where can you take that money and use it elsewhere? So considering Dayo's age, his durability, again, having, some success in the league as a sack guy, this is somebody I just thought priced himself out of the market. So I think it was very clear, probably midway through the season, it was like, I know he had a down year by his standards, but it's like if he's just not like god awful, he's not coming back here because someone else is going to pay him more money and possibly utilize him in a better scheme and be a better fit elsewhere. So I never felt like he was coming back, but I never felt like it was because they didn't want him. It's because, well, we already paid so many guys. Can we pay another defensive end $15 million? And again, or $16 million in this case. But if you do that, which in theory they could have, you'd like to be closer as a team to getting where you want to go. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's the Bills doing this, it kind of makes sense because you're going for it. Whereas with the Colts, yes, they're trying to make the playoffs and trying to figure out some things, but you still don't really know what you have at quarterback. So it would be kind of unwise, in my opinion, to invest in him, give him a big money payday, and you still don't really know like where you are as a team, really, just because of your quarterback situation.
So and that all makes sense. It's still pretty rare, I think we all know in this league, to let a guy, at a premium position, especially a pass rusher, go. And this is sort of off the top of my head, just as we're talking, I'm trying to think of situations where, a guy left the team that drafted him, pass rusher specifically, and then went on to like become superstars. Like that seems like that doesn't happen a lot. I'd really have to probably do some more research, but I'll tell you who just came to mind. Who left the team that drafted him. This was actually a 1st-round pick who went on and is still in the league and has put up 10.5 sacks, 9.5 sacks, 9 sacks, 10.5 sacks, 8.5 sacks since every year since he left his team. That's Leonard Floyd, who the Bears drafted, who's went on to have a pretty decent career despite it not working out with the team that drafted him. And I'm thinking, like, for what the Bears paid Dayo, I think you would take that over the next 3 years if he played in every single game and put up close to 10 sacks in every season.
Yeah, and I do think there's a possibility for him to take a jump forward. Like I said, on top of the injuries, you just wonder with the scheme that they had here with Gus Bradley, kind of that bend but don't break. We're going to make everything go underneath. I mean, it allowed a lot of quarterbacks to, get the ball out quickly. I mean, Justin Fields and I want to say Caleb Williams, they've had success against this team and this defense just because you get, you got to just get it out quick. And if you make a quick throw, you're probably getting 6-7 yards. I mean, that's the biggest reason probably because Bradley isn't here anymore. And I say all that to say, when you think of Dayo and the ability to get to the passer, like, again, he's not, to me, like a number one pass rush guy. But if you have a Montez Sweat out there and you have other pieces around them, I think he can get home a lot quicker and have some success. So it wouldn't surprise me if he goes on to have, a couple of 7, 8, 9, even 10 sack seasons over the next few years, just because, one, he's shown the ability that he can get there. He did. I don't think it's like that 1 8 sack season was like an outlier. I think it was kind of what he is capable of doing. But two, he's still young enough and to be growing in his game too. Like, I don't want to, make it seem like he's plateaued by any means. He's still a relatively young player, and I think Dennis Allen could probably bring, a lot of things out of him that maybe he just didn't have the opportunity to do in Indianapolis, whether it was injuries or scheme or whatever.
He tore his Achilles tendon just like a few days before the Senior Bowl in 2021. And the Colts, despite that serious injury, still took him in the second round. Like, with the benefit of hindsight, like, how much do you think that kind of changed his trajectory or maybe slowed it down his rookie season, his second season? That's a major injury to come back from.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know we're not like doctors, but usually if you tear an Achilles in major sports, it's like that second year. Not that you get the surgery done, then you're healthy, but are you yourself? It's usually that second year post-operation or post-injury where you get back to being kind of who you are. You get the explosiveness back. And I think the good thing about it is obviously, coming out, you're like, man, do you draft a guy at that position with an Achilles injury? That was definitely a gamble by the Colts. However, it did pay off, and he hasn't missed a game since. The guy plays every single, snap, every single game. And I think, that kind of should give some Bears fans and the team itself some relief, just because, you're not getting someone who's like, oh, man, he's had a couple of things kind of pop up. It was that one injury, and since then, after he kind of found his groove in the NFL, he's been fine. Now, it did take a while to get there. I think that was part of the frustration, too, is like, you want to get healthy. You want to attack the quarterback. They drafted me, I believe in the second round. I want to do all these things right away. And it just physically wasn't able to come that fast. And then when it kind of clicked, he hasn't really looked back since. I think that he's still been a pretty productive and disruptive defensive lineman. And even last year, I know the sack numbers weren't there, but same number of QB hits as the year before. So good things tend to happen when you can get to the quarterback.
Yeah, first impressions, just talking to him yesterday, seems like somebody who's driven to be better, to get better, that's not satisfied. I mean, we kind of doing this job can sort of sense with players once they get into year 2, year 3, year 4, kind of are they just happy to be here, or do they truly want to be great? I'm just curious, like, any interactions you've had with him over the years, kind of along those lines, just how you feel, just what his competitive drive is within this league.
Yeah, it's definitely high just because of his background. He comes from a pretty well-off family, but his family is from overseas, and they have their, like, like some other families that have heritage from other places, they have their own journey, their own story to, coming to America and building a new life. And so there's a lot of that, like, gratitude ingrained in him because of his heritage. And then on top of that, I think it's just his path. Like, this is not a guy who I don't think early on thought he was going to be some football star. It was kind of like, it's the funny story is I think the reason why he chose Vanderbilt is because his mom was like, well, that's the best school that offered you, like, academically. He wasn't the kid that, he get the Alabama or Auburn offer or whatever, and your parents are going crazy about that. His parents were like, well, what's their, academics looking like? And so I'll say all that to say, now that he's reached the NFL, He's been able to take care of his family. Obviously now with this new contract, I don't think his mindset or hunger will change at all. And I think now it's more so about like proving that okay, it wasn't a fluke. Why I got this deal, where I'm at in the league, why I was probably coveted highly as a free agent. And then personality wise, man, I think he can come off as being kind of reserved at first, and that's with any player joining a new team. I think he's just naturally, kind of reserved, but he will, when he gets closer to his teammates, he'll open up because I remember many Fridays when they're arguing about college football and he has to sit out because he played at Vanderbilt and they're never any good. But when they beat Alabama, this past year, I mean, he talked trash forever. And then, you got guys saying, you'll never beat us again. And he's like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to hold this against you guys forever because I can never get a word in. You're talking Ohio State or Alabama or Michigan. And so I enjoyed seeing him with that banter. And then also, the last thing I'll kind of end it with is, although he can have that fun, he can be playful, he can be kind of reserved. I think game days he's a little bit different. Like, just being honest, he is brutally tough on himself after games. Like, I mean, even if they win sometimes, and it's not like a selfish thing. I think that he legitimately, like, if he could watch tape going back to the locker room, or watch it as while he's either in the shower, he would do it because he's like, man, I should have had this strip here, I should have had this play here. And so that want and that yearn to get better is obviously something you want out of a defensive lineman. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon.
James, before we let you go, we got to ask you about your looming quarterback competition. You're about to cover there. We've covered plenty. I don't know if you need advice from us, and we tracked every pass that Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles threw in 1 year. But like, it's kind of crazy to think it was just a couple of years ago. We're down there in Indiana for training camp, and there's Anthony Richardson and there's Justin Fields, and the optimism is still high. A lot's changed since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, I would say I'm not like a rookie to this. My first year on the beat was 2022, and it was Matt Ryan. Then it was Sam Ehlinger. Then it was Nick Foles. And then obviously it was Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson. And now it could be potentially Daniel Jones starting at quarterback. And so I do think it'll be very interesting. My mindset is that this isn't really a competition until week 1 starts. I would be shocked if they benched Anthony before he starts another game for this franchise, just because he was the number 4 pick. And that was the highest drafted quarterback you took since Andrew Luck. Like, that's a big player to sort of pull the plug on before the next season even starts. However, I do think once week 1 rolls around, no matter who's in there, the clock is on. Like, if Anthony's the starter in week 1, don't think that he's safe for the season. I think that it's going to be very much, if he has those games, we've seen him where he's below 50%, passing, or he has like a, just a really erratic day, we're going to be asking, is he your guy? And we're going to ask that question now throughout probably until, next offseason, because he doesn't have any wiggle room. I think the injuries, the inaccuracy, 47.7 completion percentage last year, lowest in the league, lowest in franchise history. And then also the immaturity to a certain extent. Like, they had to bench him by what, Shane Steichen explained in a roundabout way, never made it very clear, but like, he wasn't preparing for games well enough. He mentioned note-taking as a reason why they didn't think that he was, I guess, engaged enough. And I'm like, note-taking? You don't want to hear those things. And so as far as Daniel goes, we talked to him yesterday. Typical Daniel Jones, very boring, didn't say anything. I asked him, what it'll take to win the starting job. And he's like, well, I just signed my contract. I'm here to compete and be a good teammate. And I'm like, yeah. But you wouldn't came here if you didn't know you could start. And so I don't think he has any interest in talking to some people around the league and obviously being a mentor too much to Anthony, or being the guy who, comes in and is the big brother. Like, nah, I think he's coming here to start. And so they really want to see Anthony respond to this. I think the best case scenario would be that Anthony does respond. He obviously has a big year 3 and you kind of get an answer at quarterback. But either way, I think that if they do turn to Daniel Jones at any point, then you're probably resetting in general in 2026 at quarterback, because we've seen Daniel Jones. This isn't Sam Darnold. This isn't, Baker Mayfield. This isn't Geno Smith. Like, he started almost 70 games, 69 games in New York. That is a huge sample size. So I think that who he is who we've seen. Maybe he can prove me wrong, but I just don't see that happening. So never a dull moment when you got a quarterback competition, and I guess it makes for good content.
We know that. We know that well.
So here's why I'm confused, though, James. Like, every year I feel like there are these teams where you can sit here in March and be like, oh, they're definitely going to be firing their head coach and GM, at the end of next season. And I think the Bears were probably viewed that way outside of Chicago and somewhat inside Chicago probably last offseason, where people are like, this Matt Eberflus thing's just not going to work. They should have. So, and I'm not necessarily there with Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, but because that did seem to be on the table until, that last game ended and they announced very quickly that they were going to be coming back anyway. If they're resetting at quarterback in 2026, doesn't that mean they're resetting a head coach and GM, or is Chris Ballard just completely bulletproof there in Indy?
That's a great question, and question I want to ask Jim Irsay next time we get to speak to him. So maybe at the owners' meetings, he'll spill the beans. But I'll say this. Jim Irsay operates unlike any owner in the league. And I think a large reason why Chris Ballard is still here in his 9th season with 2 playoff appearances, 1 playoff win, and 0 division titles, in a division that's wide open, by the way, every year, is because Jim Irsay likes him. Like, that's a big factor in that. Seriously, he just likes the guy. But then I also think, to your point, when you announce right after the season, hey, we're keeping our head coach, we're keeping our GM, that to me is a sign that they are now on the hot seat. Like, Chris Ballard never really acted like he was on the hot seat last year. We were all kind of like, why not? It's because he really wasn't. And so now I think when you make that announcement to the fan base and you're saying we got to play at a higher standard, I think all these guys are tied to Anthony, in my opinion. So again, while there's, perhaps I heard this theory and I don't think that it's completely untrue. It's like, did they just crack the door open and say, hey, it's open competition just in case it doesn't work out with Anthony? And we're like, well, we kind of told you, so give us another chance to pick another quarterback. But in my opinion, I'm like, look, you guys told us this was the guy. You vetted everything, to pick him. This is the guy you married your franchise to. And so to me, I don't think you necessarily deserve another chance to get it right if you get it this wrong. I mean, and then on top of that, I go back to injuries and accuracy is what it is. But the fact that, we're talking about his football character is a red flag to me, not just for him, and I believe he did respond. And a lot of it, from my understanding, isn't like he's apathetic, like he's just naive. Like, this is what you got to do to be a pro. But as far as what the regime has done, I'm like, you guys told us he was a leader. You told us he worked hard. You told us all these things. He was a 2-time captain, one of the youngest captains, I believe, in franchise history. And then you fast forward, going to a second year. You know what? Actually, he doesn't really work that hard. We got to bench him to get his attention. What? Like, so I think those things are pretty damning for this regime. And while I mean, personally, if I'm Jim Irsay, which again, I'm not, I would look at this as like a 3-person, they're tethered together. GM, head coach, quarterback. If either doesn't work, I would probably reset at all 3. And I think that that's just a fair statement. Now, I like all these guys. I enjoy talking to them, and I have a lot of respect for them and how hard their jobs are. But just being real, there's not many owners that would keep a GM around with that resume. And Shane Steichen, too, I think needs to be more an authoritative figure, a voice for the team. There's times last year where he was saying some stuff and the messaging just wasn't clear. It wasn't strong. We asked Anthony after he got benched, hey, why'd you get benched? He was like, I don't even know necessarily. I'm like, they didn't tell you? Well, not necessarily. What does that mean? So all of these things I think cannot be issues going into 2025. And so I think that year 3 with AR is a bigger, a make or break year for him and this team. But ultimately, like I said, Jim Irsay is the wild card. And so I'm very excited, hopefully at the owners' meetings later this month, to pick his brain and ask him seriously what everyone wants to know. How did Chris Ballard, who you all know pretty well in Chicago, how did he survive 9 years with this? I mean, how? I get the Andrew Luck happened, but that was, freaking years ago at this point. Walked away in 2019. That's 6 years ago. I mean, a lot of teams have bottomed out and gotten better since then. And here's one for you, last thing I'll say. Since, Andrew Luck left, every other team in the AFC South has won the division 2 times. And a couple of them have bottomed out twice. I mean, I want to say Tennessee and Jacksonville and Houston all won the division with different quarterbacks during that span, like during this 6-7 year span. And so that's pretty damning for this regime.
Well, James, thank you. The Colts have been a fun team here in Bears land because, the Chris Ballard connection. Yeah. The Bears hired Ryan Pace over him, even though he was a longtime scout here. Then you had the Matt Eberflus connection. Nick Foles played here, then played there. Just a lot and even Odeyingbo, his first defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus. He was just talking about the hits philosophy. He didn't come out and say it, but everything he said was the hits philosophy when Matt Eberflus came up in conversation yesterday at Dallas Hall. So Thank you. Just a lot of fun connections still with these teams.
Anytime, man. Always glad to come on and talk to you guys.
Thanks, man. James Boyd does a great job covering the Colts. He's got a new morning show in Indy. Check it out. Appreciate it, man. Quick follow-up on that as we bridge to Nate Taylor here. I'm confused about the Daniel Jones thing. Like, it made sense to me that he went to go sign with the Colts because I think he realized the writing was on the wall. Like, realistically, the path to starting in Minnesota wasn't going to happen with J.J. McCarthy. You look at the situation with Anthony Richardson. Okay, yeah, probably better chance that I'm going to play. But this flirting with Aaron Rodgers at the same time in Minnesota right now, which seems to be like a real thing. I guess is more about the Vikings than anything else, but I'm really confused about it because Daniel Jones going to Indy was a clear indication to me. All right, this is the J.J. McCarthy show, but now they're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers in there and complicate things even more. That just seems bizarre.
Is that for real yet, or is that just still rumored?
I mean, it's pretty strongly reported from Diana Rossini.
Yeah, I know.
That the interest at least is real. I don't know if he's going to end up there. I mean, if I was Aaron Rodgers, I don't think I'd go there, but there seems to be mutual interest.
Well, he's following that Brett Favre trajectory.
I guess
it's if he's going to stick on it, that's where he has to go by law.
I mean, could you imagine the Bears player Aaron Rodgers twice next season with him on the Vikings? I mean, it's just a weird thing. I don't know. I don't really have anything more to say about it other than I'm just really confused.
I'm not confused by what the Colts have done. Because to be honest, I feel like I've covered this story before in Chicago where the young quarterback
just think they're
falls
doomed,
out of
though.
favor. Yes, yeah.
It just seems like delaying the inevitable to me.
With Chris Ballard?
Yeah, they're just not going to be that. They're going to be an okay team this year. I mean, Jahns, they sent that statement out. I wasn't even home from Lambeau that night driving home. And I remember I pulled into a gas station to get gas and, probably a quick trip. And I see on my phone that Jim Irsay's already put out a statement saying they're coming back. And it's like, to what James just talked about. Well, one, they felt the need they had to put a statement out, which is never a great sign. But it was also very definitive. All right, we're not going to screw around with this. They're coming back. But you don't have a quarterback.
I wonder if Jim Irsay promised Chris Ballard 5 extra years after the whole Jeff Saturday fiasco. Like, Chris, let me just do this. Let me bring in my guy from television, longtime center, Jeff Saturday. Maybe you've heard of him. He's going to be our head coach. And I promise you'll have 3 more swings to fix this over the next 5 years.
Yeah, that was weird. All right, let's spin this towards Joe Thuney and the Chiefs connections here too, which there's plenty of those. Colts and Chiefs. It seems to be what this is all about every single year. Nate Taylor covers the Chiefs, and we'll bring him in now. We were just talking about off air about how that Joe Thuney trade feels like it was already 3 weeks ago. The grind of NFL free agency. What's going on, Nate?
Yes, it is a grind. I'm doing well. I'm not looking at my phone right now, which I feel like is a plus. I've already been outside this morning, and just interested to see like how the rest of the league keeps evolving before we get to the draft.
Hey, can you take us behind the scenes a little bit on just how this Joe Thuney trade went down, at least from the Chiefs' perspective? I know, from our behind the scenes, you were on top of it for a bit here. Joe Thuney himself called it a whirlwind. So what kind of happened?
Yeah. So my understanding, and I don't know if he quite said it in the press conference, but what I was told was Joe was not in America. I believe he was in Europe when he was informed of this. He was kind of like the last piece. But at the combine, you talk to a number of people, agents, obviously personnel people with the Chiefs, Andy Reid, Brett Veach, the general manager. And the thing that sort of tipped me off was the idea that there were 2 contracts that the Chiefs had to sort of figure out. And I had already reported about, hey, the Chiefs would like to, they have a deadline based on Travis's contract, whether or not Travis Kelce's going to return. And so at the combine, it was confirmed that he was going to come back, but he's still making a hefty amount of salary. And on top of that, what are you going to do with Joe Thuney's contract? Because Joe Thuney's making a decent amount of money. Are you going to add on years? Are you going to sort of restructure it? Like, how's it going to go so that you can create as much cap space for the Chiefs to try to keep contending for Super Bowls? And one of the things I heard was, well, Joe's just going to be on the last year of his deal. Like, we're not going to change it. And I went, what? Like, Joe Thuney's an all-pro. Joe Thuney is great. I'm sure Bear fans understand this already, but it's incredible that he went from being an all-world left guard to literally going to left tackle when that is not his forte. The Chiefs were in such dire straits that they moved him to left tackle, and it actually worked for as long as it did to give Patrick Mahomes just enough time to carry the team to the Super Bowl. And so based on some of those conversations, it was like, I kind of understand that, yes, Joe Thuney's at a certain age, and he's also on a one-year deal, but I also know that Joe Thuney would like to keep playing football and he wants an extension. So those two things do not make sense. And I think it was the night before that me and Diana Rossini, our NFL insider, where we started text messaging and started chatting, and all of a sudden it became clear that and I think relationships are a part of business just like they are a part of life. I mean, Brett Veach and Ryan Poles, if you don't know, I'm sure people do, but Ryan Poles used to be I think was he the director of pro personnel in Kansas City?
Wasn't he executive director?
Executive director, something. Yes, but he was high. Yeah, he was high in the hierarchy in the Chiefs front office. He had worked with Brett Veach for a number of years, before he obviously got hired with the Chicago Bears. So they talk all the time. And, I think the Patriots were the team that was also very, very interested. It was just a matter of, did they want to take on Joe's contract and give him an extension? Now, of course, Joe had already played earlier in his career for the New England Patriots. I know the Commanders were involved for a little bit, but that didn't seem like a serious back and forth. And so it became clear as to like, okay, what's the compensation going to be for Joe Thuney if the Chiefs decide to trade him to Chicago? I woke up pretty early, whatever morning that was. Was it a Wednesday or Thursday? I can't remember now. It's too many times. Hopefully this all makes sense. But because Joe was in Europe, it's my understanding that like this deal got done earlier than what you would normally do throughout the day. And then thankfully I caught wind of what the compensation was going to be, because I don't think any team was going to give the Chiefs a draft pick in this year, but the Chiefs also wanted a better deal than what the Bears did for their other guard. Tell me the name again.
Jonah Jackson.
Jonah Jackson, yes. So Jonah Jackson was a 5th round pick, correct?
6th round.
6th round pick. Okay, so I knew that the Chiefs wanted something better than that, and the Bears were like, "Well, we're not going to do that." And so you get to the natural progression of, okay, what about next year's one of your next year's draft picks? So yeah, it happened very fast, and I think literally right before it was all confirmed and the button was pushed, I think Joe Thuney, because he says it as a whirlwind, I'm pretty sure he was literally the last person who knew he was traded, which is kind of shocking considering that we live in an era now where most guys are aware when they're on the trade market, and most guys are aware why they're getting traded or where the trade destinations might be before a deal gets made.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that because, in New Orleans, it seemed like the assumption was that this thing was going to be tough to keep Trey Smith around.
Yes.
That obviously that tone changed between the Super Bowl and the Combine, because by the time we were in Indy, it was like, okay, they're gonna find some way to keep him, or they're gonna come to common ground, and then ultimately ended up being the franchise tag. But so if I had stopped you in New Orleans and been like, hey man, in a few weeks, Trey Smith's gonna be back with the Chiefs and Joe Thuney's gonna be on the Bears, what would you have said?
Did the Chiefs win the Super Bowl? Like that's the only, which is so funny. Like that's the only thing I could think of. I was like, well, wow, like the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. They're 3-time champions, and they gotta, again, because of the contract. Hey, I guess they got to do that if you want to keep the younger player at a similar position. I would have never imagined that. Now we all understand that the Bears need to get better at the offensive line, group to help Caleb Williams. We all understand that. What I would not have predicted though is the free agency class. And I know we usually talk about draft class, but the free agency class being, I guess, watered down or what people consider weak, leads the Chiefs to do something that they didn't even want to do. But they felt like there were no viable options to either keep a player as talented as Trey Smith or obviously find someone who could be an upgrade. So in an interesting way, the Bears benefit, I believe, from 3 things. The Chiefs losing in the Super Bowl, Travis Kelce making a decision to return, because if he retires, that money can be obviously rolled down in next year's cap. You can move some things around. Maybe you actually keep Joe Thuney because you understand you want Patrick to be as protected as possible if he doesn't have a security blanket in Kelce. And then the last thing is Trey Smith was going to be the most coveted offensive lineman in free agency. And the only way to ensure that he never even got to the market was to place the franchise tag on him, which the Chiefs did not want to do, but they felt it was necessary because they didn't want to be outbid by someone who had more cap space, a la the Chicago Bears, the New England Patriots, so on and so forth. I know there were some people that thought, well, maybe because Mike Berganzi just got hired as the assistant general manager from the Chiefs to be the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, would the Titans want to get in the mix for Trey Smith? So when you have that many teams circling, the Chiefs made the decision to franchise tag Trey Smith, which is $23.4 million. It's nuts. So it basically guarantees that whatever the extension is going to be, Trey Smith's going to be the highest paid guard in the league. All of a sudden, it becomes untenable for you to have a high-paid left guard, the highest-paid center in Creed Humphrey, and the highest-paid right guard in Trey Smith. You got to move one of them. And so the Chiefs, like most smart teams do, say, hey, we love you. You have had no issues. I cannot stress this enough. Joe Thuney is an absolute professional football player who will one day, I believe, end up in Canton. But because of his age and he's in the last year of his contract, that is the reason why the Chicago Bears were able to land him.
Can we go back to 2021 a little bit when Joe Thuney arrives? Ryan Poles, like he brought this up in his answer about him. Like, I was there in Kansas City when we had to overhaul our offensive line, like across the board, and we did that to create a playoff push for ourselves, and it worked. Like, what was Ryan's role in that? Because that's what the Bears are literally doing right now.
Yes,
really overhauling their offensive line. So you have Thuney, Trey Smith arrives. A lot of the names we're just talking about. Like, so what happened in 2021? And I'm curious, do you think it could work for the Bears with Ryan Poles now here?
It should. It really should work, because I think this is and I don't know if, I mean, I know who Ryan is. I know he doesn't want to share a ton. He might be more reserved than like people in Chicago want, which I understand. But that is kind of his masterclass as a front office member with the Kansas City Chiefs, especially given his background as a, high level former college offensive lineman himself. Obviously, I'm sure people know this, but he used to play with Matt Ryan back in Boston College. And so, each scout, each executive has their sort of forte, their sort of expertise, and you work alongside the general manager to try to make it all work. And I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen, it's the first day of free agency. The Chiefs have just been, blown out by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. And Chiefs fans must be thinking like, okay, well, we're obviously going to get another receiver. We're going to get another running back. Maybe we need to get help on defense. Their first signing was Joe Thuney. And the reaction in Kansas City was, who the hell is that? That is no. A guard? We're giving a guard how much money? And there was some speculation as to like, well, why aren't the Patriots retaining him? Like, that's Bill Belichick. Like when Belichick gives people away, it doesn't really go well. And so I remember that day being like, okay, they're gonna push all in on the offensive line. And then Ryan Poles did I think a masterful job understanding not only how talented Trey Smith was, but helping again. I think he, Brett Veach, and Andy Reid got the medical staff to understand that, hey, like, yes, this is a blood clot situation. How can you manage it? What did Tennessee do in his last year of college to get him to play throughout the course of that season? And what are his traits? What are his skill sets, personality-wise? Is he coachable? All these things that led the Chiefs to getting Trey Smith in the 6th round, and they got Creed Humphrey, the best center in the league, in the 2nd round. And I'll just be honest, that was the best draft pick the Chiefs have had in like 4 years. Like, it was so easy. Where you look at the tape and you go, oh. And then I remember the first day of training camp, me and Ryan talking, and when we do the first day of pads, individual drills, like, and just, I mean, he whooped he was a stone. It was a wall. And it was just like, okay. So he understands that is the responsibility, right? When you go to Chicago as a general manager, you first have to get the quarterback right. Then you have to build around the quarterback. And so he did I thought, a very good job from a skill position standpoint, but obviously you've got to improve the offensive line. And the joke in Kansas City that I have sort of coined, and I think Joe likes it from a tongue-in-cheek standpoint, is I call Joe Thuney a robot because A, he gives the most cliche answers, and B, he has some of the most consistent pass blocking techniques I've ever seen, especially at the left guard position. Now, at left tackle last year, he was a little out of his realm, and he was just trying to survive, like die a slow death every single snap and not get his quarterback killed, which is incredibly admirable. But when you watch him from a pass blocking standpoint at the left guard position, I mean, it looks like he's doing the same thing play after play. Does not matter if it's a stunt. Does not matter who the defensive tackle is. If it's a blitz, very cerebral and very robotic in terms of just his technique. And then again, he is not the most quotable player in the locker room, but a good dude, professional, doesn't miss games. And so the Chiefs found someone who they knew was going to be a stabilizing part of the offensive line. And similar to what is going to happen, I believe, in Chicago, Joe's been to the Super Bowl already. He had already pass protect for Tom Brady. So he's seen everything. And that's going to help your quarterback. That's going to help your center, who was obviously a rookie at the time, and Creed Humphrey. That's going to help anybody on the offensive line that's younger than him. The Chiefs traded for Orlando Brown Jr., and much of Orlando Brown Jr.'s success in Kansas City was playing next to Joe Thuney. So he only had to worry about, his responsibilities to not let a pass rusher beat him, with speed on the edge, because his inside shoulder was going to be okay because Joe wasn't going to give up any pressure on his left shoulder. I hope that makes a lot of sense, but I just always remember that you could argue that what Mike Berganzi, Andy Reid, Brett Veach, and Ryan Poles did in 2021 is the reason why the Chiefs went to back-to-back, or the first team that won back-to-back Super Bowls in 2 decades, because that offensive line absolutely nullified the Eagles' pass rush 2 years ago. And then against Joey Bosa and a very good 49ers defense in the second half in particular, ran up and down the field, scored on every possession. And that's the reason why the Chiefs won and why Mahomes was allowed to be so brilliant. And that's what makes it so compelling, is that they put Joe out of position. They were weaker at 2 of the spots on the offensive line, and that is exactly what the Eagles exploited, to where Patrick Mahomes could literally not do anything. It's the worst I've ever seen him play, where he was looking at the defensive lineman within 2 seconds of having the ball, which is so uncharacteristic of obviously what we've seen throughout his career. So if Ryan can do this and Joe Thuney can still play at a high level, which I believe he can, he still has probably 2 to 3 more good to very good seasons in him. I don't know why it wouldn't work, because he has all that experience and he's so consistent. It is like it's like a godsend for Caleb Williams, in my opinion, just because the guy has been excellent no matter where you put him. And he's just I just have a lot of respect for Joe Thuney, and I think Chiefs fans, again, which is the full circle of who the hell is this dude, and why are we paying, however many millions of dollars for a left guard that does not matter, to, oh my God, why did we just trade, Joe Thuney? Like, Chiefs fans were like, and that's all we got? All we got was a 2026 6th-round pick. That's all we got. He's an all-pro. He's a Pro Bowler. He's going to go in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, the compensation kind of shocked me too. I would have thought would have been more for an all-pro. But the Bears, I mean, our assumption here is that the Bears are going to extend him at some point. So, I mean, the last question I have for you, and it seems like you've already sort of answered it, but so Joe turns 33 in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah, in the middle of the season. I think he's been insanely durable too.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you worry a little bit about the fact that on the plus side, you play 6 Super Bowls in 9 seasons, which is insane to do. But that's also a lot of extra football. I mean, that's a lot of extra football over the course of your career. Would you know him better than us at this point? Would you extend him if you're the Chicago Bears?
Yes. What'll be the hiccup, I imagine, will be the guaranteed money and whether you want to do that in the 3rd year, right? So what I would argue, I guess, is could you get him on a 3-year deal where you basically rip up this contract that he's on now, the last year of this contract, and could you guarantee money in most of the money in year 1 and year 2? And does he want more guaranteed money to some degree in year 3, because he has been so durable, he has been so excellent? I would give him an extension to where he could circle back going into age 35. And we've seen in the past, especially at the left tackle position, that you can play pretty well up until 35, 36, slightly 37. I think 37 is where it gets a little tricky. Now, Joe's only had one major injury when he was in Kansas City. That was a torn pectoral muscle. But again, he came back. Again, this is, how insane he is. But he came back in training camp and was ready to go for the first day of pads and had no issue for the rest of the season. And, we've seen what torn pectoral muscles can do to players, where that might linger for, 12 months, 18 months before they get back to feeling, totally who they are from a full health standpoint. I would extend him because even if his play might dip to some degree, it's still going to be good. It's still like he's right up here. The Chiefs had the best interior trio in the NFL with Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. So if the Chiefs felt like they could extend him, they probably would have. But the issues, like we talked about before, is they're going to pay their 2 younger players on the interior, and they have still, they're not going to change Travis Kelce's contract, because I assume this will be the last year of his career. So I guess as a courtesy, he will make, I got to look up the numbers again, but it's going to be like 15 million, something in there. And obviously Mahomes' contract is, bananas, where they have to restructure it every year now. So I would extend Joe Thuney, excuse me. But I would try to get him on a 3-year deal to where I would feel pretty comfortable that he's going to be probably Pro Bowl, perhaps All Pro again. And he'll probably still be good to very good going into age 34, 35.
Nate, my last question for you is, like I had this question for Joe, like just the human element of being traded. Like, what was it
Yeah.
like? And his answer was about all the nice messages he received from KC.
Yeah.
What did he mean to his teammates? Like, wasn't he
Oh.
voted like a team MVP?
Yes, he was voted the team MVP. Like, I want Bears fans to really understand this. His quarterback is Patrick Mahomes, and everybody on the team was like, that was incredible, right? Like, most years, it's like Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes. They were like, no. We have to give the award to this man. So every year, and this is just the Chiefs tradition, every year they let the players vote on who is the rookie of the year, who is like the, most comeback player of the year kind of thing, or, someone who has just a nice like bounce back season. And then obviously who's the team MVP, and that is named after Derek Thomas, the late great Hall of Fame pass rusher. And so when I saw it, I was like, yeah, it makes total sense. Like, the guy had the biggest sacrifice all season, because it was middle of December. The Chiefs offense was kind of like just, in the mud. And in order for them to be a legitimate contender, for them to try to push to a three-peat, they had to take one of their best players and play him out of position, and never made it a big deal. Totally took it on. Did not have the right technique. He played left tackle in college, but I remember asking him on media night for the Super Bowl, like, did any team ever think you were going to be a tackle in the NFL? And he laughed at me. He said, no, look at my arms. I do not have left tackle arms. And so he just did a masterful job against Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Danielle Hunter. I think he spent, I'm trying to think who the Bills put him across. I don't know if it was Russo, or I think it was Gregory Russo. They mostly put him across, but I have to double check it. And then obviously it's like, good luck. That's Josh Sweat. God help you. Like, good Lord. But he went through this gauntlet and had not given up a sack until the Super Bowl. So his teammates love him. He, again, incredibly smart, incredibly durable. I just know it. I just know, again, I've known everybody for a while, but I just know how much that sort of ached Patrick personally, because you understand it. If you're Patrick Mahomes, you're like, well, I love Trey Smith too. Like, I want to keep Trey Smith as well, but it's like, oh, we have to trade Joe. And it's like, yeah, that's the business of the NFL. And so I look forward to, I know Patrick hasn't said anything publicly about the trade yet, but I look forward to asking him similar to you, Adam, just like, hey, like, in terms of the teammate, the human element of it all, like, I think teammates were legitimately shocked that, like, wait, he was our team MVP last year. Wait, he did everything right. Like, he earned all the accolades. He earned his contract. Like, we really, like, there were multiple players who tweeted, like, we traded Joe. It's just like, yeah, that's the business of the NFL. So I think he will be similar to, and this is so funny too, like, the 1 year we got Bill Belichick to be an analyst to, like, really tell us things about the NFL, he praised Joe Thuney throughout the season as well. In particular, once he was forced to make the switch to left tackle. So I can't imagine how much of a relief it's going to be for Caleb Williams to get to work with Joe, to just see, like, the way his brain works. And then obviously you don't have to worry about that guy. Like, that guy's just going to come in, he's going to practice every day, and he's going to be really, really good at his job. So again, he will not give you the best quotes. I cannot stress this enough. He will be boring to a T. Like, I had to work really hard to build a good relationship with Joe to, like, get some personality out of him, but he doesn't care about that. And he's just trying to do the right things at all times, say the right things at all times, and obviously play the right way. So I imagine that, midway through the season, you guys are going to be like, wow, like this, like, it's a very good trade for the Bears. Like, I cannot believe that the Patriots or the Commanders weren't willing to, like, beat the Bears offer. but that's the reality. And the Bears look to have an offense that I think can be functional. And I'm excited to see what Ben Johnson does because he understands the importance of the offensive line just like Ryan Poles does. So what better player to acquire and to build your offensive line around, even though he's in, the later end of his career than Joe Thuney.
All right, Nate, awesome stuff. We appreciate it. Our listeners and viewers can follow Nate on Twitter @ByNateTaylor. Always doing a great job. And we definitely got the full download on Joe Thuney there, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Anytime, fellas. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nate.
All right. Nate Taylor. With basically the biography, the full biography on Joe Thuney there. Bears fans should be excited after hearing that.
His reaction, like the best stuff from Nate was actually his laugh about like he was voted team captain, just traded, and this is a team with Patrick freaking Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and some other notable Chris Jones, another Hall of Fame caliber player on this Chiefs roster. I think the reaction and just the some of the most telling things are always like the reaction of like the current teammates. It's not like DeMarcus Lawrence leaving the Cowboys. This is Joe Thuney leaving. Yes, yeah. This is Joe Thuney leaving the Chiefs, and everyone's like wondering, like, what the hell, man? Like, it's Joe. He's our team MVP. So great stuff from Nate, and that's the strongest stuff, I think, is when you have that much respect, that much love from your teammates.
And again, it is shocking to me that it only took a future fourth to get that done. But sometimes the league is weird like that sometimes. And teams get really scared about age. And I imagine, too, just the amount of snaps, because that matters more than, honestly, age. It's just there's been a lot of snaps there. But I think it's going to work out great for the Bears. I think it's a great trade for almost nothing, very little risk. And I agree with Nate. I would extend them for at least a couple more years.
But, yeah, we talked about this. It's 2-3 years. 2-3 good years out of Joe Thuney will be so valuable for the next steps for Caleb Williams. I mean, there's going to be a ripple effect across that offensive line. You're talking about wins. You're talking about the development of your young quarterback, all within that 2 to 3 year window we've been talking about within the rookie contract of Caleb Williams. So there seems to be a plan here for the Bears that we can all see, and it all makes sense to us for the first time in a long time, Adam.
Yeah, I think that's a big takeaway of this week. Bears seem to have a vision for what they're doing, which isn't always the case. And we'll have plenty more time to talk about all that. It's been a crazy week. I need a nap. And also because I stayed up too late watching hockey last night. But
you need more coffee. That's all you need.
Yeah, coffee, nap. It's too nice, actually, to nap.
Throw a little Bailey's in there. It's that time of the year.
Okay. Well, I think I'm done after this for the day. So I got some outdoor furniture to put together. Be a nice day outside.
We'll definitely put some Baileys in there then.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, you got a big weekend ahead of you too there.
St. Patrick's Day weekend, man.
Yeah. You got the Irishman and the I don't know, the neighborhood you live in.
We're gonna
go all out. Yeah, you're gonna go all out. I actually got some plans tomorrow too. So, but we got to dodge Wisconsin winning the Big Ten tournament too this weekend. So we'll get there. Condolences to the oddly high number of Northwestern basketball fans that were in the Bears media room yesterday.
Yeah, it is.
Which I think only one of them actually went to Northwestern.
True.
Which would be the Fishman, Kevin Fishman,
who wore purple.
That's fine. I did technically walk in there with a Badger hoodie on. I changed it to be professional during the press conference, but yeah. All right. It's been a fun week. It's been a crazy week. Hope you enjoyed all the content. A lot of great stuff there from James Boyd and Nate Taylor. Thank you to them joining us. Our producer, Katie Langen. We got a lot of good stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks, so don't go anywhere. We will continue to break down all the moves because there will be more. And in fact, they signed a receiver yesterday. We got to talk about at some point next week. So we'll get through all of it, and appreciate everybody watching, listening. Please hit that like button and subscribe on YouTube, and also subscribe as a podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, always available. Please rate and review the pod. Anything you can do there on either of those platforms or both greatly helps us grow the show. HogeandJahns.com is where you can get all the merch. And we are out of here. We're going to go enjoy a St. Patrick's Day weekend. Talk to you next week.
See ya.